Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Big Apple Blitz. Matt O'Leary alongside Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Once again, new episode, a new backdrop for me. I can't stay in one place for too long. Always on the move, always traveling, but nevertheless, still ready to talk New York Giants and New York Jets.
I love it. Another background for Anthony, but we still have a lot to get into today. We'll start with kind of something we hit on Monday, which was the idea of Haason Reddick potentially holding out. It seems as the week's gone on here that he is looking for a new contract. So kind of figured we'd talk through, one, just the idea of the Jets giving him a new contract and extending him beyond this season, and then trying to figure out what that might actually look like. So your thoughts on the Jets actually, not only trading for, but then paying Haason Reddick to keep him here longer than just this season.
I still feel like the 1-year rental is fine and benefits the New York Jets the most, although it seems like that's probably not going to be an option. Haason Reddick looking for an extension, looking to get a few more seasons under contract with the Jets. I think that if they can get him to play out the final year of his deal, maybe just throw on some extra incentives and sweeten the pot that way, that's what the Jets should do. But I'm not sure if they're going to be successful. It seems like Haason Reddick is eager to get a long-term deal.
Yeah, that something similar happened last year when he was in Philadelphia. He didn't go to OTAs, and they are voluntary. I think we'll have a better idea next week with mandatory minicamp if this is actually a holdout or not. But he was not at voluntary OTAs last year, and it was part of the reason was because of the contract. He was looking for a new contract last year. In the final year of that deal now, he's due $15 million. None of it's guaranteed. But I think in my preference would be to let it play out this year or tack on an additional year, have it like this year and next year. So you have him for this Aaron Rodgers window, but they might have to go a little bit longer than just a 1-year extension. I'm thinking potentially a 2-year deal with Danielle Hunter being my comp. Danielle Hunter just got paid by the Houston Texans at 2 years, $49.5 million. Similar in age, similar production as well. So you think that's a fair base point for a guy like Haason Reddick at 29 years old, 2 years, 49.5, maybe you just round up to 50 million, to 25 million a year, somewhere in that range for a player of his caliber?
I think that's fair for him, and that's probably what he's looking for. But with Haason Reddick, the comparison to Danielle Hunter makes sense. But Danielle Hunter, I feel as though, is the better player and has been producing at a high level for longer than Haason Reddick and has put up more consistent seasons throughout the entirety of his career. Obviously, we all know Haason Reddick had that late bloom with the Arizona Cardinals in 2020, his 4th season in the NFL, cashes in with the Carolina Panthers, cashes in again with the Philadelphia Eagles, and has been consistent and very productive over the last 4 years. And Danielle Hunter, similar story, but he did it all with one team, and he's done it at a higher volume and more frequently than Haason Reddick. So while I see the argument for that contract being a good price point, I do think that Danielle Hunter, the better player, deserves more money. And again, Haason Reddick, at this age and with another change of scenery, you never know how that's going to affect a player. I'm just not bought into the idea of continuing to sign him long term. I think that this was a contract that the Jets traded for, knowing what the contract was. It was 1 year of Haason Reddick, and I think that's all that they really wanted and all that they were looking for, especially in this championship window where if things don't go according to plans in 2024 for the Jets, maybe some significant changes happen in 2025. I think that could be on the horizon. So this is kind of that make or break year. They loaded up and they wanted 1-year rentals like Haason Reddick, like Mike Williams as well. They didn't have plans to bring these guys long term. I think that they were here for this season, and if this season doesn't go as planned, they do need to keep the exit point off of some of these contracts.
Yeah, that's a really good point to bring up is what the Jets did in trades and free agency, in addition to Haason Reddick, like Tyron Smith, who's a 1-year deal. They trade for Morgan Moses, who's on the final year of his deal. You mentioned Mike Williams. Haason Reddick's another one who is, on the final year of his deal. So I think that's, absolutely valid when you look at it, like kind of loading up to go in for this year. I think, for me at least, as long as Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback, whether it's just this year or if it's beyond this season, I think we get him in 24 and 25, and then anything beyond that is up in the air. Just personal feeling on it. So I'm good with adding on the extra year on the extension. I hear your point on Danielle Hunter as well, with him kind of being more consistent. Like dating back to 2016, he was putting up big seasons for the Minnesota Vikings. It was banged up and missed some time in 2020 and 21, but then came back strong the last 2 years with 10.5 sacks and 16.5 sacks. Getting paid off a 16.5 sack season is also a little bit different than getting paid off an 11 sack season. It's not, a knock against Haason Reddick, who I think is still, one of the better edge rushers in the league. I just don't. I don't know. Maybe it is coming in a little bit less than Danielle Hunter, and Hunter got that that bigger jump in pay because of that 16.5 number that really jumps out.
Yeah, and big numbers jump out for Haason Reddick as well. 12.5, 11, 16, and 11. So every year you're getting at least 11 sacks from him over the past 4 years. And he's been a tremendous player. Obviously was a second-team All-Pro just 2 seasons ago, back-to-back Pro Bowl campaigns. So you could definitely make the argument that he's worth the money and that you should give him the pay raise and extend him long-term. It's just, I don't know why this is the one that I choose to die on. Like, this is the hill that I choose to die on. I just don't feel like Haason Reddick is worthy of this long-term extension for the Jets. I just don't think it makes sense for their plans. And I hear your point about Aaron Rodgers, and the window is here as long as Aaron Rodgers is here. But I feel like every single offseason we're going to hear speculation about Rodgers' future, the same way that we did this offseason. We thought for sure it was run it back season and he was going to be making the comeback. And then there was speculation that he might join the presidential election race. So who knows what it's going to be next offseason. I don't really think that you can predict too far in the future with Aaron Rodgers and this current New York Jets team. So I don't think that the planning ahead and signing a player like Reddick long-term is necessarily the smartest move. So I don't know why this is the one I choose to be stubborn on, why this is the hill I'm choosing to die on, but I just feel like Reddick was brought in on this 1-year contract, 1 year remaining on his contract, with the intention of having him play out the 1 year on this contract. And it's basically going backwards with the demands of a player just to appease him rather than the actual roster construction and proper building of this team. And I think that Joe Douglas and the Jets front office should stay firm and just make him a 1-year rental.
Yeah, no, and totally fair on that. I guess I slightly worry if, and this is looking too, fully admitting this is looking too far ahead, but at the end of the year, if let's say they just let Haason Reddick play out the year and then they do let him walk, I do worry a little bit about that edge room, because then it would just be Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald. We're all hoping that Will McDonald takes a second year jump similar to what Jermaine Johnson did last year. But with how much the Jets like to rotate, I think they need 3, or honestly, probably preferably 4 really solid edge rushers. So they would have to replace Haason anyway. And you could make the case maybe they go back to the draft, but they've spent a lot of assets at the top of the draft on that position in years gone by. They might also have to replace DJ Reed, which is something that maybe they look to the draft for. So my worry would be if you're letting him walk and then have to find somebody else in free agency. I guess maybe that's a problem you look at in 2025, but I don't think they could just get by with only Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson as their main guys on the edge.
I get that concern and it makes complete sense, but with Robert Saleh and the fact that we were just discussing something similar to this last week, he's very good at developing young defensive talent. And I know Jets fans not high on Will McDonald right now don't feel like that was the greatest selection. He might have a great year. He might have a really awesome 2024 campaign, and you do feel comfortable 1 year from now going into the regular season with him as one of your two starters, and you don't need that third guy like a Haason Reddick. So it's totally possible. The way that the best NFL teams structure their rosters, they do bring in these star-studded talents. They have these veteran players that you know are going to be excellent for you. But then they have players developing behind the scenes, and once those contracts expire on those veterans, those behind the scenes players that developed now take over that role, and the production drop off is minimal or sometimes increased. And that's what you're hoping for with Will McDonald and the New York Jets at this edge rusher spot. I think ideally he is the one that succeeds Reddick next season. It just remains to be seen whether or not he'll be able to. So you're right, it is a risk to go into the season without some long-term assurance with Haason Reddick, and you are banking a little bit too much on the development of Will McDonald. But I think that you're banking more so on the coaching point of this staff and Rob Saleh.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Like if they deserve any benefit of the doubt, it's on the defensive side of the ball. So who knows? That could end up being a 2025 issue. But, as we move forward here, we'll probably have a better idea next week when we're doing our show on Monday and Thursday, what the status of Haason Reddick is. And if it is truly a holdout. But kind of just wanted to talk through the contract some more, as that was a big story this week. Another big story this week, friend of the show, Nick Sirianni, taking some shots at the New York Giants and their fans with Saquon Barkley. I'm sure you handled that one pretty well.
I just found what he said to be really ridiculous. Like he said, he talks to Giants fans sometimes when he's walking about the streets. Giants fans heckle him, which is hilarious. Shout out to Giants fans. Keep doing that because Nick Sirianni, he stinks. The Eagles stink, all that. But he said that when he responds to the Giants fans who heckle him, he just mocks them and says, "We got your best player." And I think that that's opened up a wide portion of conversation in this Giants fan base about, was Saquon Barkley really the Giants' best player? And I think that the answer is adamantly no. I mean, Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, those two players were better than Saquon Barkley last season. I'd even go as far as to say is Xavier McKinney was better than Saquon Barkley last season. So he wasn't even the first best player, wasn't even the third best player. Saquon Barkley, best of luck to him with the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm hoping that it doesn't go as planned for him and that the Eagles have a losing season. But Nick Sirianni taking shots at the Giants, I feel like he is just such a punk, and he's doing it all the time, not only just at the Giants, at the Chiefs as well. We all remember that when he was yelling at the Chiefs fans in the tunnel, and then lo and behold, the Eagles didn't really make that deep playoff run. Look who became the Super Bowl champs once again. So I just don't like Nick Sirianni. I think that he is a punk. He annoys me, and I think that he needs to fact check his statements.
Yeah, totally fair. Nick Sirianni definitely plays the villain well as a head coach. I would even call him insufferable. I can't stay anytime he's his face is shown on the screen. It just bothers me. I'm not even a Giants fan, but just in general as an NFL fan, I find him very, very annoying. But at first, when I heard the comments, I laughed, especially at your tweet where you're like, I didn't know Dexter Lawrence was there, paraphrasing, but you made a point to bring up Dexter Lawrence and him still being with the Giants, which is obviously true. He's by far their best player. And then I was thinking, I was like, well, is it their best offensive player, Saquon Barkley? And I'm like, well, also no, because Andrew Thomas is there. The clapback doesn't hit the same if you're like, we got your fifth best player. It doesn't hit as good as we got your best player in free agency.
Yeah, what they essentially got is our most popular player. That's totally true. Saquon Barkley probably sold the most jerseys of anybody on the Giants last year. He was a former number 2 overall pick back in 2018, but that was all the way back in 2018. That was 6 years ago now. Saquon Barkley, sure, maybe the most popular, definitely the most overrated Giants player, because there are probably people that thought that Saquon Barkley was the best player on this team last year. Not true. Got to watch the game a little bit closer than that. Saquon Barkley, just at this point in his career, is not what he was expected to be when he was drafted in 2018, and he's not what he was in 2018. He was an absolute dominant force and a supreme talent, but we're talking ACL tears and ankle injuries later, many of them. He's just not what he used to be, and so that's probably going to come back to bite the Eagles, who paid him out this 3-year, $12 million plus per season deal. I think that's going to be one that they ultimately regret. And at the end of the day, with Saquon Barkley, the Giants lost, sure, their star running back and the superstar player that defenses key in on, but then they brought in Malik Neighbors, who's now going to do that for you in the passing game, which is just indisputably more valuable to have your superstar as a receiver versus as a running back. And then they brought in Devin Singletary, and their backfield looks fine to me. I think I've seen a lot of debate lately about Giants having one of the worst backfields in the NFL. Singletary is a good rusher. Tyrone Tracy Jr., this rookie that they drafted out of Purdue, he's a good receiving running back. And then they have Eric Gray, who they drafted last year, who was really good at Oklahoma. There is some talent in this backfield. It's not like they just don't have anyone capable of running the football. They're just building with a low-cost, high-efficiency backfield now and a committee. And I think that's the way to go because Saquon Barkley joining that Eagles team, I hope that I am right about this and that this doesn't come back to bite me. I don't think that makes them a Super Bowl contender. I don't think that having a running back who could potentially go for 1,000 rushing yards, which he didn't even do last year, makes the Eagles a Super Bowl contender. I think DeAndre Swift was a better player last year. So looking at all those factors, losing Saquon Barkley, it's almost like addition by subtraction. They lose Saquon Barkley, but they get cheaper in their backfield and they get more talented in their receiving core. I think that in the long run, this is going to be something that benefits the Giants and ultimately holds back the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at a Singletary, he was in that next draft class 2019, a year after Saquon Barkley, but he also has a lot less tread on his tires too, which is something that we talk about. And if the Giants offensive line is improved, I think that really matters more than them having that big name running back. They could do the running back by committee. I like that they, put an emphasis on wide receiver and bring in Malik Neighbors, and you still have Slayton and Hyatt, who we'll get into later in the show, and Wan'Dale Robinson and all these guys to build out a well-rounded group. I guess my question for you is Nick Sirianni a casual if he's out here calling Saquon Barkley the Giants' best player? Because I would say casual and you don't know ball to Nick Sirianni. Those two very popular Twitter quotes I would throw at our guy here.
I would throw those both at him as well. I think you're 100% right. He's casual. He doesn't know ball. And ultimately, that's why the Eagles did not make the deep playoff run that was expected of them. And honestly, Nick Sirianni, he can keep playing the villain role, as you said, and he can keep acting this way. If he doesn't get past that hump here with the Eagles, I mean, his seat is already hot, I think. From everything that we read this offseason, it sounds like Howie Roseman and the Eagles ownership and management, they're having second thoughts about Nick Sirianni. And I have to imagine that his personality is one of the reasons why they're having second thoughts. So he can keep playing the villain role, but if you're not a super villain that actually wins football games, what are you? You're just an annoying guy that talks out of his ass in the media. So Nick Sirianni, if he doesn't deliver this year, if Saquon Barkley doesn't somehow put up 1,200 yards rushing and bring them deep into the postseason, I don't think that Sirianni's ball knowledge is going to be in question any longer. I think we're just going to know that he doesn't know ball and he's going to be coaching elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, they were pretty quick to move on from Doug Peterson, who won them a Super Bowl. It was like their first down year or bad year with Doug Peterson, and they moved on. And granted, 2020 was awful, and Carson Wentz significantly regressed that season. So I get it, wanting to hit the reset button, but the point of they've moved on from a lot better of coaches and ones who actually won a Super Bowl relatively quick after 5 seasons. I don't think they would hesitate to move on from a coach after 4 years with, especially like you said, he rubs people the wrong way. So I feel like even Eagles fans down the stretch last year were kind of out on Sirianni. So I don't know. He might need to humble up a little bit here.
I think so too. I'm hoping that the Giants are the team that humbles him. It'll be an interesting matchup. I believe it's week 10, Giants versus Eagles. Saquon Barkley finally comes home to MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. That's one that I think Giants fans are going to circle on their calendar and look forward to. And, if it goes according to plan, the Giants will do some humbling that day and Nick Sirianni won't have as much to chat about.
I love it. Let's get into the Jets running back battle. We talked a lot already on recent episodes about Braylon Allen, the Jets running back that they took out of Wisconsin last year. But it's already becoming obvious, Anthony, that he's going to be this team's RB2, which isn't really all that surprising. We thought that would be the case once he was drafted, but the Jets signed Tariq Cohen. They drafted another running back in Isaiah Davis. They had, Izzy Abanikanda, who they drafted last year. So there was going to be this pseudo, competition in that running back room. But I get it. It's only OTA, so we'll see if this continues. But he's gotten a significant amount of first team reps with no Breece Hall practicing. Totally fine with him not, practicing in OTAs to save him and get him ready for the season. But with Allen already being such a big part of this offense and looking ahead of the pack, I think it's a no-brainer that he ends up as this team's second running back.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I will say that it is OTAs and we do have training camp, and there's always the opportunity for another player to stand out and step up. And, you also have to keep in mind that training camp brings on the pads and brings on the injuries. So you got to keep that in mind and say, while right now it's easy to project Braylon Allen as the RB2, I guess once again, I'm playing a little bit of a devil's advocate here and saying, let's just throw caution to the wind. It's very early in the offseason. And there's a lot to be excited about. And the Jets fans should be thrilled with what they're potentially getting in Braylon Allen. He should be the RB2, and I'm hoping that does shake out that way. I will just say training camp and the preseason ultimately should determine what the depth chart looks like. And I think that it's tough to put too much stock into the OTA practices and the way the players are performing when they are running around at OTAs.
No, that's totally fair. And like you said, rather, it's really the big test is when the pads come on and you get the training camp and even the preseason games. I feel like in those preseason games, we really see like guys start to move up the depth chart. Usually like one thing, not saying that I disagree with it, but just one thing that I'll give some pushback on that with is more often than not with this regime with Robert Saleh and the coaching staff, they almost never use their younger guys early on. Like at this point last year, Joe Tippmann was like the third center on the depth chart. Sauce Gardner wasn't running with the ones until August. And maybe the Jets don't really have as much of a choice because they just drafted 2 running backs and Breece Hall's not working. So the younger guys are going to get more reps. But for a team that usually likes to bring on their rookies a little bit more slowly, for him getting a little bit of run here, and on top of that, him adding an element to his game, he's been used a ton as a pass catcher. And Robert Saleh talked about that almost being like a pleasant surprise because at Wisconsin, they never, ever used him as a pass catcher out of the backfield. The Jets have started to do that a little bit, again, early in OTAs, but seeing that he can handle that is, I think, at least just a positive sign in him trending in the right direction to be this team's second running back on the depth chart.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. The fact that they don't just insert the rookies immediately up on the depth chart, and Braylon Allen has been working up towards that spot. It looks great, and the fact that they're using him as a pass catcher, I know that we talked about that a few episodes ago, just discussing the way that would almost bring in a new layer of the offense and giving Aaron Rodgers an additional weapon underneath, because there are so many vertical separators in this offense. Like Mike Williams was the big addition. He's the guy on the sideline that you want to throw those back shoulder fades to, but who's catching these passes underneath and turning a 2-yard pass into a 15-yard gain? We talked about Malachi Corley and Braylon Allen, how he's going to be able to do that, and that is super valuable. I think that every NFL running back room needs a guy, yes, who's your workhorse and who takes the majority of your handoffs and basically is your bell cow, but you also do need a guy that gets out of the backfield and kind of specializes in that area. And you didn't think that way of Braylon Allen coming out of Wisconsin, but hearing all of this that he's doing at OTAs and the way that they're utilizing him and the way that he's standing out in the receiving game or in that department of his game, that's really important. And I think that will bring that extra layer to the Jets offense and give them more comfortability depending on Allen going through the season. So I think the fact that he is running well, he does look good. He looks ginormous. Every picture that I've seen of Braylon Allen at Jets camp, he looks like he's the Incredible Hulk, which is very exciting. But when you see the way that he's running and you see the fact that he's added a little bit more receiving repertoire to his skill set, all of that very important and will make the Jets feel more comfortable relying on him in a game setting.
Yeah, just I think I'm just happy in general that they figured out he can catch now in OTAs rather than week 8 against the Giants last year with Breece Hall. It took like Nathaniel Hackett half the season to realize that Breece Hall was good out of the backfield catching passes. So I'm kind of just glad, like, that was late October, like, not 4 months ahead of the curve here, almost 5 months ahead of the curve on Braylon Allen. So I'll chalk that up as a win that the offensive staff maybe has a little bit of a brain this year.
And who gets the credit for that on the offensive staff? Do we give some credit to Nathaniel Hackett? Do we say that Aaron Rodgers noticed the skill in Braylon Allen? Is it the running backs coach? Where does the credit go?
Great question. New running back coach this year, Tony Dews. He was with the Tennessee Titans. The Jets have pretty much just brought over the Tennessee staff. They have Keith Carter, Todd Downing, and Tony Dews, all from that, Vrabel offensive staff from a couple of years ago. But I'm going to give it to Aaron Rodgers, the credit here, because, again, we've talked a lot about this too already on the show. The Jets' plan on offense last year was, give the formation into Rodgers and kind of let him diagnose things at the line. So I'm going to say the brains of this function is Rodgers, and I don't think that's an unfair statement based on past history with Nathaniel Hackett calling plays without Aaron Rodgers around.
Yeah, good point. I will give the benefit of the doubt. Why not to Nathaniel Hackett? Maybe he saw something in Braylon Allen. No, I don't believe that. I have very little faith in Nathaniel Hackett and very little confidence in his ability to run the offense. But Aaron Rodgers, on the other hand, I think he knows what he's doing. So I'm going to agree with you. I think that he's probably the one who deserves his credit. But ultimately, Braylon Allen deserves the credit. If he's making plays as a receiver out of the backfield at OTAs, it's probably something that he focused on and looked at as a weakness of his coming out of Wisconsin and decided, I got to do something to strengthen this and improve in this regard and make sure that I am ready to go once Jets OTAs and practices roll around. So credit to him. And I'm excited to see what he does this season. And I think that having him as a running back out of the backfield that can catch the ball, very important. We'll get him on the field more often than not. So it'll be exciting to see Braylon Allen develop.
I'm with you on that one. Let's get into the final Giants topic of the day. Jalen Hyatt, a little stock up action there. Supposedly looks very different this year in year 2. Got to be excited about that as he heads into his sophomore season in New York.
Yeah, I'm super excited. And if you're looking at Giants OTAs, it's wide receiver coach Mike Groh had this to say about Jalen Hyatt. Quote, his growth so far, a year removed from when he first got here, is tremendous. All of the work that he put in, investing in his game, learning what, how, and why. He's just a different guy. He's got stronger here in the offseason, end quote. So really love what Mike Groh had to say about him. I like that he referred to him as a different guy. Mike Groh was praising pretty much the entire receiving core, had some nice things to say about Malik Neighbors as well, but it was really his quotes on Jalen Hyatt that stood out to me and got me particularly excited because we've been talking a lot more recently about Jalen Hyatt on Fireside Giants and on this show as well, discussing why he might be the one to really have that breakout. Like, we've mentioned Wan'Dale Robinson. Maybe his breakout has already happened, though. Last season, he kind of did break out. We've talked about Darius Slayton, the role that he's played and will continue to play as he's still got 1 year left on his contract. But it's Jalen Hyatt who's the more unknown commodity. He had that rookie season. He barely played. When he did play and he got his opportunities, he capitalized and he did flash potential. He just didn't do it often enough. Had some drop problems, didn't make a lot of plays underneath, really just ran go routes all game long. But if Jalen Hyatt is able to expand his route tree a little bit, strengthen himself, his body, and be a little bit more physical, which is what it sounds like he's done here at OTAs, according to receiver coach Mike Rowe, he's the player that could really have that breakout, especially if Brian Daboll is calling plays. Brian Daboll loves to throw the ball deep. Brian Daboll loves Jalen Hyatt, is the reason the Giants traded up for Hyatt. So all of these factors included make you really excited about Hyatt's potential this season, and hearing that he's hit the ground running at OTAs makes you feel even more confident that that breakout season could be on the way.
Yeah, I think it is. I'm excited about Jalen Hyatt for the Giants. That was a player that I really liked in the NFL draft last year, and I thought the Giants got really good value taking him in the 3rd round. I thought he was a borderline 1st round talent. Ends up falling, and kind of had a limited role in his first year, as you said, more of just that deep threat. And I think there's value with that, and maybe his game comes more to life when the Giants have a quarterback who can push the ball down the field. But more of the story, if he's expanding his route tree and becoming more than just that deep threat guy, I think that's really the thing that gets you excited. You know, he could beat people down deep down the field. Hell, he had the most famous incomplete pass of all time last year in the preseason, deep down the field against Sauce Gardner. So we're seeing over and over again his ability to and his speed to push down the field. But again, if he opens things up underneath, that just is making him a more well-rounded receiver.
Well, I also think the Giants having a little bit more pass protection will help Jalen Hyatt. Obviously, bringing in John Runyon and Jermaine Illuminor, basically upgrading both of those guard spots in pretty significant fashion. That should give the offensive line a little bit more time protecting the quarterback, and hopefully, whichever quarterback it is, hopefully not Daniel Jones, is able to throw the ball downfield and hit Jalen Hyatt in stride and create some big-time plays. So that'll help Hyatt, and the fact that he has more consistency from the quarterback position should help him, and the fact that Malik Neighbors is in the lineup taking up double teams, creating more one-on-one opportunities down the sideline for Jalen Hyatt, that's going to be big time because oftentimes last season when Hyatt was on the field, you just leave a safety deep on his side of the field and you know that he's not getting the football anymore. But now with Malik Neighbors out there, you can't really do that. Malik Neighbors is an elite deep threat. You can put a safety on the side of Malik Neighbors and he'll still beat you. So when you have that to deal with as a defense, it gets even harder to deal with a Fred Biletnikoff winner in 2022 and Jalen Hyatt on the other side of the field, who also could stretch the field, go vertical, and beat you deep. So now there are so many factors in play for Jalen Hyatt. He really didn't have the best opportunity last year to showcase his skills based on everything that went wrong with the New York Giants and the way that the rest of their team was constructed. But now that they've altered this offense and they've added some more talent to it, it's really structured in a way that should allow Jalen Hyatt to get a lot of opportunities. And all he has to do is just rise to the occasion. And that should be really exciting for Hyatt. But I will also mention here, I'm seeing some breaking news. Former Giants player, Sterling Shepard. I'm not sure if you have that pulled up.
You read my mind. I had it ready to share as well. So we'll pull that up as you're talking about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, Sterling Shepard. Honestly, I'm surprised. I thought that he was going to retire. There was a lot of talk last offseason about a potential retirement. He came back to the Giants for one more season, broke a record, most career receptions, I think it was, in Giants franchise history, or maybe didn't set a record, but just moved past Jeremy Shockey on the list. I know that for sure. Sterling Shepard is a player who has dealt with a lot of injuries, but has always been an exemplary person, player, athlete for the New York Giants. So once a Giant, always a Giant. It's sad to see him go. I never thought that I'd see him play elsewhere. This felt like a player who wears one color for the entirety of his career and then retires. He's going to go link up with his former college quarterback, Baker Mayfield, and I'm hoping the best for Sterling Shepard, but it is pretty sad to see him go.
Yeah, a good Giant. And as you said, unfortunately, injuries the last really 3 years. Played 7 games in 2021, 3 games in 2022. Actually appeared in, I take that back, appeared in 15 games in 2023, but not a huge focal point of the offense anymore. 10 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown this past season. But I mean, you look at his 2018 season, played all 16 games, had 107 targets, 66 catches, 872 yards. Good Giant.
Yeah, really good Giant, a consistent player when he was on the field, and a player that just didn't reach his potential due to the injuries. And that's ultimately so disappointing to see. And a lot of them were concussions. He was off the field for a long time due to concussions, which is scary in and of its own right, which is why, again, I thought that he was going to retire. But I'm interested to see what happens with him in Tampa. I will say, though, this does kind of sort of feel like when Victor Cruz signed a 1-year deal with the Chicago Bears, didn't make it out of preseason. He was also in the twilight stage of his career, was dealing with a lot of injuries a few seasons prior. That's kind of what this feels like with Shepard. We'll see if he makes the roster. If he does, he probably plays the same role that he did for the Giants last year, which is locker room guy and maybe gets out there in the fourth quarter of a blowout game. That's what Sterling Shepard was last year. I don't expect him to be much more than that for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but hey, like I said, good for him. He made it onto he was able to sign with another NFL roster, and I'm hoping that he's able to make some sort of impact there, whether it's on the field or, like I said, in the locker room, because over the last 2 years, that's where Sterling Shepard's impact was really felt. He was a tremendous locker room presence. He was basically a player coach for that 2022 season when the Giants were going to the playoffs. He was unfortunately unable to play throughout the postseason, but he was on the sideline every single game, helping coach up the players, hyping up the players. Absolute hype man. Love Sterling Shepard. He really did put it all out there and put it all on the line for the New York Giants. So a guy that I'll always respect and wish the best for as he now moves on to Tampa Bay, Florida.
Yeah, Tony chimes in and says the Giants wide receiver room really isn't that bad. I agree with that. I think obviously the addition of Malik Neighbors, they desperately needed a number one, and you hope that he comes in and is a number one right away. I think he is. But they have, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson. I forgot about Allen Robinson too, by the way. Allen Robinson's in the mix. Jalen Hyatt, Isaiah McKenzie. They have some options here. I'm curious to see, again, it's way too early. Maybe we'll get a better idea as training camp goes on, but do you have like a pecking order in mind? Who's going to be the wide receiver 1 and 2 and like kind of going down from there?
Yeah, I think that wide receiver 1 is obviously Malik Neighbors. And first of all, with Tony, what he said, Giants wide receiver room really isn't that bad. I think it's one of the most underrated units in the entire NFL. Like, they have depth. They have really good players. They have 4 high-quality starters on this team. So, number 1, Malik Neighbors, obviously. But number 2, that's kind of open to debate because it's Darius Slayton. He's the number 2 receiver. He's an outside receiver, and he's the one that's been leading the league in receiving or leading the team in receiving for years and years. So I'm thinking he's the number 2 receiver for a time, but Jalen Hyatt has every opportunity to overtake that position. Slayton going into the final year of his contract, Slayton getting up there, a little bit more in age. Another year has passed, and Hyatt is just a younger, more exciting talent. Jalen Hyatt has the opportunity to overtake Darius Slayton as the wide receiver 2 at some point this season. And then wide receiver 3 playing out of the slot, that's going to be Wan'Dale Robinson. And based on target share and reception total, he's probably going to look more like wide receiver 2 just because he's always open in the underneath portions of the field. And Mr. Checkdown himself, Daniel Jones, is going to throw the ball to him a ton. He's going to check it down to Wan'Dale Robinson almost every single play. So Wan'Dale's going to get a lot of run. He's going to get a lot of receptions. Jalen Hyatt's probably starting the season off rotating in as the wide receiver 4. But hopefully by the end of the season, he's able to play well enough to overtake that wide receiver 2 spot from Darius Slayton because it doesn't seem like Slayton is in the Giants' long-term plans.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that makes sense as a pecking order. And Wan'Dale at his size, like at 5'8" and like 180 pounds roughly, he's gonna be open a lot over the middle of the field and used kind of as just that primarily slot guy. I'm curious, do you think they use Jalen Hyatt inside at all? I feel like with his size, he's someone who could also probably benefit from being in the slot.
Yes, I do. And if you look at Jalen Hyatt's collegiate career, a lot of what he did was in the slot. He made a lot of plays from the slot receiver position. So I imagine they're going to rotate him in there. It's just kind of tough because Wan'Dale is purely a slot. I don't see Wan'Dale making much of an impact on the outside because he's so undersized. He's going to be your slot receiver. And if you're going to move any of your outside guys inside, you almost would prefer to do Malik Neighbors because Malik Neighbors was an assassin out of the slot the past 2 seasons in collegiate football for LSU. So you want to move Neighbors all over the lineup whenever you can based on the matchup. If you've got a bad slot cornerback that you're facing this week, now you want Neighbors in the slot. If you've got a bad outside cornerback, okay, now you want Neighbors primarily outside. So he's the one that's probably going to rotate in and out. And Hyatt, you would love to see him do that as well. However, I think that opportunity is going to be given to Neighbors whenever they can give it to him over Hyatt, just based on the fact that he's the more talented player.
I agree. I'm with you on that. I think that's how it ends up shaking out for the New York Giants. Really, just the big question. I like what they did with the offensive line additions. Wide receiver room, I think, is coming along. Quarterback. It's going to always come down to the quarterback for this Giants team. And unfortunately, we got to bring it up at least once an episode. I don't think Anthony or I are expecting that year 6 Daniel Jones leap.
The year 6 Daniel Jones leap. Man, if it happens, though, we got to do something crazy on the channel to celebrate. We got to have some sort of celebration episode planned if the Daniel Jones year 6 leap happens. But that'll be in an alternate timeline because it's not going to happen. Daniel Jones is not going to have the year 6 leap. I have zero faith that he's really going to wow me and put up 30 touchdowns. But I do think Malik Neighbors will carry him to some wins and carry him to a certain yardage threshold. But at the end of the day, if Daniel Jones doesn't stay healthy, he's not going to have the year 6 leap, and staying healthy has been a major challenge for him throughout his entire career. So health has been a problem for the Giants in recent years. Quarterback problems have been abundant for them. And honestly, man, I'm ready for it. I'm rocking with my guy, Tommy DeVito, for the rest of the year.
Tommy Cutlets season. I'm really excited. I know we're a far way to go still at this point, but I'm very excited for when games start rolling around and we get our reactions on Monday and then previewing the next thing and storylines on Thursdays. I think in season, this show is going to level up. That's all.
It'll level up for sure. And then if you take that to the next level with any potential quarterback controversies that the Giants have, and we get on to DeVito watch, if we start to see whether or not Tommy DeVito makes his return to the lineup, I mean, it's going to be like a party every week when he's back in the lineup for me. So, yeah, that'll be a lot to look forward to, and that'll be a whole lot of fun. So hopefully DeVito is on this roster. I know, again, he still has to earn his spot through training camp and everything, but he's looked good so far at OTAs. Daniel Jones has looked inconsistent, to say it nicely, and we'll see ultimately who rises to the occasion during the regular season. But like I said, I'm rocking with my boy Tommy DeVito, and I'm hoping that somehow, some way, he becomes the next Hall of Fame Giants quarterback.
There we go. Last thing to close out here with Tony the GM. Do they have odds on comeback player of the year on Daniel Jones? Are you throwing some coin on Daniel Jones to win comeback player of the year?
To put it nicely, no. I am not putting any money on Daniel Jones. Maybe if I'm betting against him, possibly. So the odds are plus 2,500 according to Betting Pros, is what I just found. So plus 2,500, can win some money if he does end up winning comeback player of the year, but I wouldn't bet on it because he's not going to. If there is a Giants bet that I would bet on, I'll give you two. It's either going to be Rookie of the Year with Malik Neighbors, or if you wanted to take the less realistic bet, Brian Dable back against the wall, Coach of the Year. He could maybe do it again. I doubt it. I really can't see it happening because, again, I think this team is going to be held back by its quarterback position. But Daniel Jones having the comeback player of the year feels even less likely to me than the Brian Dable Coach of the Year. So just take that for what it's worth.
I don't know if you saw who the favorite for NFL comeback player of the year is. Oh,
I think I could take an easy guess.
Yeah, there we go. Aaron Rodgers plus 100 on DraftKings. Tony also wants to know Darnold. Darnold is not listed on here. I don't have him on here. I would think he's probably pretty low. But Aaron Rodgers is the favorite plus 100. So even money.
There you go. I think that Anthony Richardson's got to be high up there as well. I would imagine.
He's plus 750 on DraftKings, which is fourth.
How about Breece Hall for Offensive Player of the Year? I feel like that could be an interesting one.
Now you're speaking my language. Breece Hall, Offensive Player of the Year. So while I'm pulling that up, I have a take. I don't know if it's like that crazy, but I'll gauge it with you. By the way, I believe it's plus 750. No, that's from last year. Come on. Why is it giving me last year's numbers? Plus 3,500 is what it is? Okay. But anyway, what I was going to say is I think at the end of the year, Breece Hall has a chance to be RB2 behind Christian McCaffrey.
Now that's a hot take.
Okay. I think he's going for like 1,400 on the ground and maybe another like 600 to 700 through the air.
A 2,000-yard season from Breece Hall, this team better be deep in the playoffs if that's the case.
I think they will be. If, like you said, if that's the case, I think they're going to ride Hall and Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, I can't totally rule it out. I could rule it out for Saquon Barkley and the Eagles. That's not going to happen.
No.
Just to make full circle of this episode and throw it back to the beginning minutes where we were talking about Barkley. But Breece Hall, yeah, absolutely has the talent to do that. And that's why I mentioned him for potential Offensive Player of the Year. But 2,000 yards total, second best running back in the NFL. You know, we'll see. I mean, there is still some good running back talent. I'm actually curious to see how Derrick Henry performs on a new team and if he's going to kind of like return to form with the Baltimore Ravens, or if Baltimore Ravens running backs are just doomed to be injured because they're always injured. So I'm hoping that the injury bug doesn't get Derrick Henry this season.
Yeah, that'd be tough. You're right, though. Every single year, they just feel like they're rotating through. a bunch of different backs. But Andy, really fun episode today. Any thoughts on what we'll be getting into next week? Quiet weekend for the Jets and Giants. Something going to happen here? What's the vibe?
Again, I'm thinking that we're just waiting now for Darren Waller to make it official. He's going to retire. I think that's a really poorly kept secret. But now he just has to make it official, and the Giants have to get that salary cap space, and then we'll discuss whether or not they should sign anybody and who that player that they may or may not should sign should be. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. And, of course, I am keeping my eyes closely on OTAs, Tommy DeVito. How is he performing? Is he starting to look like QB1? Is he going to take the position from Daniel Jones? That's what I'm going to be keeping an eye on all summer long.
There we go. We got mini camp for the Giants too next week. Mini camp open.
Yep.
All right, there we go. So we'll be covering that next week. I think it's going to be quiet the rest of the way, but we appreciate you guys hanging out with us for another episode of Big Apple Blitz. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. You can follow along with Anthony for his Giants stuff over on Fireside Giants. You guys know where to find me, Matt O'Leary, NY, and Talking Jets for my Jets coverage. That'll do it. I'm Matt. He's Anthony, and we'll catch you next time.